Have you ever felt a presence you couldn't name, a shadow at the edge of your vision, a chill that lingers long after the sun has set? Sometimes it's not the supernatural that haunts us, but the memories of someone who once meant everything. There were moments in crowded rooms when I'd catch a whisper, my name or maybe just a familiar laugh, only to turn and find no one there. It was as if she was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost threading through the fabric of my daily life. This isn't a story about traditional ghosts, but about the haunting of a past relationship that refused to fade. I'd find traces of her in the most unexpected places. A song on the radio, a book left on my doorstep, a scent that drifted through my apartment on sleepless nights. It's about someone who, instead of moving on, reinvented herself to remain an unseen part of my world. She became a master of subtlety, always just out of reach, but close enough to unsettle me. Imagine discovering that someone you once loved has meticulously altered their identity, not for themselves, but to orbit your life, disguised as a stranger. I remember the first time I noticed a new follower on my social media, someone who seemed to know too much, who liked the same obscure bands, who commented on memories only she and I shared. This is a story about the subtle art of manipulation, the power of intuition, and the difficult act of setting boundaries to protect your own emotional safety. I questioned my sanity, doubted my instincts, and wondered if I was imagining it all, until the evidence became impossible to ignore. Sometimes the most loving act is to truly and completely let go. It took me years to realize that holding on to a ghost only kept me trapped in the past. This is how I learned to say goodbye, not just to her, but to the version of myself that couldn't let go. Our relationship, let's call him Leo and me Clara, was a slow burn, the kind that felt inevitable and safe. We met in college, drawn together by late-night talks and a shared love of old movies. For years, we built a life out of small rituals, Sunday pancakes, handwritten notes tucked into lunch bags, quiet evenings reading side by side. But somewhere along the way, the rituals became routines, and the spark that once felt effortless began to flicker. I remember one night, sitting across from Leo at dinner, the silence between us stretching longer than usual. "Are you happy?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, searching for words, then just shook his head. "I don't know anymore," he said. That moment lingered between us, heavier than any argument. We tried to fix things, date nights, long walks, even couples therapy, but the laughter that once came so easily now felt forced. I caught myself longing for the version of us that no longer existed. The breakup was mutual, a sad acknowledgement that we'd grown apart. There was no single moment, just a series of small goodbyes, shared glances, missed calls, dreams we stopped sharing. We divided our lives with quiet civility, promising to remain friends, not realizing how hard that would be. I remember packing away our memories, each item a reminder of what we'd lost. When Clara drove away, I expected grief, but felt only emptiness. I replayed our last conversation in my mind, her saying, "Maybe we're just holding on to the idea of us," and me, unable to disagree. The silence she left behind was louder than any argument. I wandered through the apartment, haunted by the absence of her laughter, her scent lingering in the sheets. I believed it was the end of our story. I told myself it was for the best, but the ache of what we'd lost stayed with me. I had no idea it was only the end of a chapter. After the breakup, Clara's silence was absolute. No texts, no calls, no social media. The world felt unnaturally still, as if holding its breath. Every night I stared at my phone, waiting for a message that never came. The quiet pressed in, heavy and suffocating, making the air feel thick. Our friends asked about her, but I could only guess. I wondered if she was out there thinking of me, or if she had already erased me from her life. She became a ghost in our community, absent, but always a topic of conversation. Her absence echoed louder than her presence ever did. I tried to convince myself her silence meant she was healing, but a nagging unease grew inside me. Something about the quiet felt unnatural, almost ominous. Sometimes I imagined her in the shadows, plotting, her mind racing with plans I couldn't begin to fathom. The silence wasn't peace. It was the tension before a storm. I felt the pressure building, like the air before a thunderclap. The silence was the deep breath before a plunge, the moment when everything holds still before it shatters. The storm was gathering, and I was oblivious, blind to the signs, deaf to the warning in the hush that surrounded me. 6 months had passed since Clara and I last spoke. One evening, a connection request popped up on my screen. Kara Nelson. The name was new, but the smile in the profile picture was hauntingly familiar. I stared at it, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. At an industry mixer, I finally met her in person. Clara, now Kara, stood before me, almost unrecognizable. Her hair was shorter, styled with precision. She wore glasses she never needed before, and her wardrobe was sharp, professional, calculated. She had become someone new, and yet, beneath the surface, I could still see traces of the woman I once knew. She greeted me with a practiced smile, her voice steady and unfamiliar. It was a flawless performance. She was Kara now, a stranger with a carefully crafted past. I realized she must have spent months preparing for this, rehearsing every detail, perfecting her new persona. My mind raced. Was this a bizarre coincidence, or was she orchestrating something? I remembered how driven Clara could be, how she hated being forgotten, how she craved connection, even if it meant rewriting her own story. She had always wanted to be seen, to matter. And now she'd found a way to re-enter my life on her own terms. That night, I pored over her online profile. Every detail was different. Her name, her job, her backstory. It was all meticulously constructed to intersect with my world, to make her present seem natural, inevitable. She had erased Clara and built Kara from the ground up. The transformation was complete. Clara was gone, replaced by Kara, a woman whose life now overlapped with mine in ways I couldn't ignore. The silence between us was shattered. In its place was a haunting sense of purpose, a calculated return that sent chills down my spine. I realized this wasn't a chance encounter. She had reinvented herself, not just to escape her past, but to stay close, to me. Every move was deliberate, every detail chosen to draw me in. My reality was about to unravel. The woman I thought I knew was gone, and in her place stood someone both familiar and utterly unknown. Kara's integration into my life was subtle, never forced, always explained by coincidence. But the coincidences multiplied, each one more improbable than the last. She appeared at my favorite coffee shop, joined my friend's book club, and became a recurring figure in my social circle. I'd run into her at the grocery store, at the park, even at a charity event I'd only decided to attend last minute. My friends liked her, unaware of her true identity. She blended in so well, it was as if she'd always been there. Online, she left breadcrumbs, liking posts, commenting in shared spaces, never directly interacting with me. Sometimes I'd get invited to events she was already attending, as if by accident. She used social media as surveillance, tracking my life from the margins. I'd catch her watching me from across a room, her gaze quickly shifting away. I felt trapped between two realities. My ex had vanished, but her double was everywhere. The more I noticed, the more the world seemed to close in. When I tried to explain, friends dismissed my suspicions. "Don't you think it's strange?" I asked one night. "She's everywhere I go." My friend just laughed. "It's a small city, man, you're overthinking it." But her strategy was brilliant. She made me question my own sanity, weaving a web so intricate I couldn't tell what was real anymore. The turning point came during a weekend trip with friends, when a single, seemingly innocent gesture caught my eye. Kara was there, and I noticed her twisting a ring I'd given Clara. My heart pounded as suspicion took root. That small detail shattered my doubt. Kara was Clara. I felt the world tilt beneath me. I started digging. Late nights spent scouring public records, cross-referencing addresses, and searching for any trace of her past. I found her legal name change. Kara was an alias. Her work history was fabricated. Every job reference led to dead ends or disconnected numbers. Her new identity was a complete invention, supported by forged documents and carefully curated social media profiles. She'd severed ties with her family, erasing every connection to her old life. I found evidence of her burning photographs, discarding childhood belongings, destroying every trace of who she once was. The web of deceit was vast. Each thread I pulled revealed another layer of lies. She hadn't just haunted me, she'd erased herself from existence, vanishing into a new persona. The more evidence I uncovered, the more I realized the depth of her obsession. Her journals filled with notes about my life, her surveillance of my every move. She'd gone to terrifying lengths to remain close, tracking me, blending into my world without my knowledge. The truth was more disturbing than I'd ever imagined. My reality had been rewritten by someone desperate to stay in my orbit. What compels a person to dissolve their own identity just to remain tethered to a former partner? Psychologists call this phenomenon identity fusion, where the boundaries between self and other blur until separation feels like annihilation. For Clara, the breakup was not just loss, it was an existential crisis. Her sense of self had become so intertwined with mine that, as Dr. Kristen Neff notes, the loss of a relationship can feel like the loss of the self. Creating Kara was Clara's attempt to reconstruct meaning from chaos, a desperate act of self-preservation driven by a terror of erasure. According to attachment theory, such behaviors often stem from deep-seated fears of abandonment. Instead of turning inward to heal, Clara projected her pain outward, seeking proximity at any cost. I often wondered if she even recognized herself anymore, or if she was simply chasing the echo of who she used to be. Her reinvention wasn't about growth or transformation, it was about preservation. She clung to the version of herself that existed when she was loved, unable to imagine a future beyond that identity. In her struggle to survive the loss, Clara's identity fractured. As trauma experts suggest, sometimes the greatest danger is not losing someone else, but losing yourself in the process. Confronting her was the hardest thing I've ever done. For days, I rehearsed what I would say, scribbling notes and crossing them out, my mind racing with doubts and fears. I kept asking myself, was I being too harsh or not firm enough? I met her in a public place, laid out the evidence, and told her I knew. My voice shook, but I forced myself to be clear. This wasn't just about me, it was about respect, about honesty. The mask dropped. She confessed, saying she just wanted to be near me, even as a stranger. Hearing that, I felt a wave of sadness and confusion. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but I knew I couldn't. I told her, gently but firmly, that her actions were a violation of my trust and boundaries. I explained how her choices had made me feel unsafe, how trust, once broken, couldn't be rebuilt overnight. For my own safety, I needed zero contact. No emails, no texts, no accidental run-ins. Saying it out loud made it real. And the finality of it hit me hard. Setting that boundary was painful, but necessary. I struggled with guilt, wondering if I was abandoning someone who needed help. But I realized I had to protect myself first. It felt like a second, more brutal breakup. The loneliness was sharper this time, mixed with relief and a strange sense of freedom. I left knowing she needed help I couldn't give, and I had to rebuild my own sense of security. Drawing the line wasn't just about keeping her out, it was about letting myself heal and learning to trust my own boundaries again. The first lesson, self-worth must come from within, not from another person. Only when we recognize our own value can we truly love and be loved. When we lose ourselves in a relationship, its end can shatter us. But in that emptiness, we find the space to rediscover who we are. The second lesson, trust your intuition. It's a vital form of self-protection. Listening to that inner voice is the first step toward healing. The third, healthy detachment, is an act of love for yourself and the other person. Letting go is not a failure, but a courageous act of self-respect. True closure requires a clean break, not clinging to the wreckage of the past. Growth begins when we allow ourselves to move forward. Clara's refusal to let go trapped us both. But in that struggle, I learned the importance of setting boundaries and honoring my own journey. Healing means facing the emptiness and rebuilding from the ground up. Each small step forward is a victory. The hardest, most important lesson: we must find our way back to ourselves, whole and complete on our own. In letting go, we make space for new beginnings, deeper connections, and a future filled with hope. In the end, letting go isn't about losing someone else. It's about finally finding yourself.